Hello and welcome to episode 74 of Knobcat Games Dungeons of the Obelisk podcast. I'm your host, Joe Sleppy, Executive Prime at Knobcat Games, and this is our audio devlog where we get together every 2 weeks and talk about our game, Dungeons of the Obelisk, a 2D turn-based dungeon crawling loot grinding adventure, and I'm joined today by our digital alchemist, TJ Adicernian.
Hello.
And we don't have too many. I don't know. I never know if the topics are going to be enough to make an episode or not, and then we always end up like going long. But we're going to talk about some meta builds and stuff, like what people have been running in the game to like clear Titan and push challenges. And then but I think we'll start with maybe just talking a little bit about the challenge update and how that's going.
Yeah, so I'd say the current progress on challenges are looking pretty good. It's a pretty large cluster of changes that we're actually putting in for it, and for now, starting off with changing the resource type that's spent on it. Instead of using energy, swapping it to tickets.
Yep, challenge tickets.
Yep, challenge tickets.
The official name for them. So that's just a matter of, like, we talked about a little bit on I can't remember which podcast it was, but when we announced that we were going to be updating challenges, I kind of said, like, most of the changes aren't new things. They're all kind of, like, we don't have to build anything, like, brand new from scratch. It's all the changes are, like, little things that are kind of in the game already and functioning, and then we just have to get them kind of set up to work for challenges the way we want. So, like, adding a new currency for challenges shouldn't be too tough, right?
No, not at all. It's taking like what we already have, what we already put in place, and then kind of just giving it to another feature. And I feel like it's a good way to actually separate what challenges are, fully finalize it as its own separate game mode with its own separate reward system.
Yeah, for sure. The reason I wanted to do it this way is because when we first started challenges, they were just kind of like a quick thing that was kind of like half of a game mode that I really wanted to do, and we kind of simplified it, put it in the game, and it gave us a lot of extra content, and we kind of did it quickly, so we ended up just using the same energy system that we already had for dungeons. It made it so that you basically had to pick if you were going to run dungeons or you were going to run challenges, and it turns out that challenges are way faster and more efficient to run as long as you're not wanting some of the dungeon exclusive crafting materials, like for upgrading your artifacts and companions. So I think what it did is it forced a lot of people to run challenges instead of dungeons, and then whenever they wanted to upgrade their artifacts or companions, they like just didn't have those materials because they weren't running the dungeons anymore.
Yeah, I feel like playing efficiently is pretty common thing, almost globally common for games. So when you add in challenges, and these challenges take the same resource as a dungeon did, whichever one gave you the better rewards would be the one to run. So at the end of the day, the challenges ended up starting to push above what a dungeon would be used for, outside of just going into the dungeon for that resource. So I feel like the split that we're doing for this is actually making a lot more sense. That way you have incentive to do dungeons, challenges, and breaches all separately from one another, and gain rewards in a logical sense between all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talked about like what we were updating like a little bit, but we didn't really get into any like specifics of it. So this is the first time we're mentioning like the tickets and stuff. It was me and Nika that talked about the challenge update, I guess. So we didn't get your perspective of it, but I'm trying to think what else there is that we kind of want to talk about on it now. Yeah, I guess like the first step was making the tickets and getting them to work. So what's the next step, I guess?
I feel like so once the ticket system's in, and that's an actual resource the player can use, next up would be lining up its reward system. Not only changing how much is given per challenge, but also changing things like, do you gain more for a certain difficulty of challenges? As you progress, do you progressively start to gain more of something? Which we ended up deciding upon, like increasing the amount of like gold the player could get, increasing like what type of loot drops can they get? Can they get set items? Can they get champion items to start popping up? which that increases the reason to push further. If I remember correctly, the main reason why you would push in a challenge was just for bragging rights and not a ton after that.
Yeah, there really was no reason to do higher challenges other than wanting to be on the leaderboards. We talked about that a good bit on the last episode, but now it's going to be we're kind of sectioning things out a little bit. Typically, I try not to nerf things, but this is going to feel like a little bit of a nerf because right now you can run level 10 challenges and you can drop challenge items and sets, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense where you can run basically the equivalent of a level 10 dungeon but get champion items or set items. You know, the set items don't drop until you can actually beat the boss in the breach, who is definitely tougher than level 10 dungeon. And you know, we don't even have godly items in the game really yet. They should have technically came first before champion, but just the way that I wanted the rewards to work in challenges, they just ended up coming first. But I think it's going to be level 25 you can start dropping set items, and then challenge level 50 you can start dropping champion materials and recipes. So it gives you more incentive to climb up at least to level 50 to get those champion items, and then it also makes the champion items like that much more like rare and kind of special, I guess, whereas instead you could just run, like I said, basically level 10 dungeons and just as long as you ran enough of them, you got lucky and dropped it.
I feel like it's one of those things where although setting level requirements for the reward is technically nerfing the process of doing a challenge, it's creating proper incentive for playing it in the first place. Because like if you were just spamming level 10, doing the lowest level just because you are trying to get the reward, there's not really a ton to shoot for in comparison. Whereas once we set it up for level 50's a bare bones requirement, you now have to continuously push and reach the level that like you'd probably be doing on breaches. Because I forget what the max difficulty level of a breach is, but as a multiplier on the enemy's power, it would be very similar to, if not identical to, fighting level 50 enemies in the first place.
Yeah, level Titan breaches is basically like doing level 50. So level 50 challenges is kind of, that's why I picked that number, was to match it with Titan in order to get champion items. So one thing I've been thinking about is adding some godly items into Titan, but that's not going to happen right away, but it'll probably make more sense too. Like, you know, you get to Titan, now you can drop some godly items and then get to the equivalent of Titan in challenges and you can drop your champion items.
I feel like putting in the system like that starts to really round out how the reward system actually works. Go up in difficulty, not only do you gain more basic rewards, but you also start to gain more power. And then you can push your character to be even stronger, and I guess at the end of the day, clear the level 50 difficulty even faster than you do before.
Yeah, because even if you get one champion item, you still have to roll a good one, so it takes a few tries typically before you can get one that's like really good. There's also going to be some like incremental rewards for just beating certain levels. I think we started out with like some materials for upgrading like artifacts and companions, and I think there's some crystals in there, and I think level 100 I think is where I wanted it for like being able to increase the amount of tickets you can hold. There's some different things like that as rewards as well.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty big change, because outside of reaching level 50 purely because you can get the main rewards you're looking for, an even bigger incentive would be the one-time trigger rewards of like, oh, you beat it on level 50, you beat it on level 100, beat on, I don't know, level 200, 300. Each of these giving a special one-time reward to the player is an even bigger incentive to push, not only just for the leaderboard, but for what you might gain as a reward for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the higher levels are going to be star cores as rewards, so I think that is a really good incentive to try and push up there.
Definitely a massive bonus for pushing high, because yeah, not only are they hard to get, but having something that guarantees a drop source of them is just all the more reason to push further than usual.
Oh, and you touched on it earlier, but we have it basically every 10 levels. gives you 10% more gold find as well, is what it's going to be, up to 200%, I believe. So it's going to be kind of the way it falls out is like your dungeons are your normal like gameplay. You run those with your energy. Your breaches are increased item find, so you can grind there to try and get all your legendaries or breach set items that you want, and then your challenges become the place to grind for gold.
I feel like the gold reward's going to end up being massive, that you can get from high enough that certain equipment starts to, I guess, lose effectiveness to a degree. Like if you put on the crown to increase your gold find, but you also do a level 200 challenge. Sure, it does still technically stack, but you start to get diminishing rewards, and you might as well push for power. At that point, speedrun a level 200 challenge.
Yeah, the crown, I don't know. Like a good crown can still be like quite a bit. I think I have ones that have like over 50% gold find on them. So like it's still probably worth putting on if you're farming for gold. So you might want to stack that up as well. But yeah, the pumpkin head is probably the best in, not probably, it's definitely the best in slot for the head. And then the second would be like maybe the 3 sword style set sword for your head. You also have the croc head as an option as well, I guess.
It starts to depend on how effectively you can clear the crowd. More turns means mana regenerate takes a higher priority compared to damage reduction.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we could switch our topics and maybe start talking about some of the meta builds a little bit. Vant kind of helped me put this list together, specifically some of the ones for pushing breaches or pushing challenges. And then we also came up with the Dragon Twister build together as well. But I think we'll start with like the crit chance build. So critical chance and critical damage is probably the easiest meta build to go for. There's a few things that give you guaranteed crit chance. You can get a ton of crit chance from some of the artifacts like the Mask of Tagura, and then a lot of it's just getting like the main hand Grave Filler can give you crit chance, and the Shiver is a good offhand to give you crit damage. And then once you get to challenges and get a pair of Rat Wranglers, those have guaranteed crit chance on them as well. I know my Clone 334 character has like over 40% crit chance, and I know Vant's character has like over 50%. Yeah.
That's when you're hitting some pretty solid numbers.
You know, with the right artifact for your build, you can kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say, you can kind of like specify it, like whether if you want to do tons of damage but be a little less consistent, you can get the Yule Goat. Or if you just want tons of crit chance and, you know, don't care as much about the damage, you can go for the Unconquered Light. And then if you want to go in the middle, which seems to be the best, you can go for the Mask of Tagura. I think it's kind of cool that that's the first one we designed, the first artifact we put in the game, and it's still probably the best option for like a good meta build.
I feel like efficiency is such a big deal, like efficiency and reliability when you're designing it. So when you have the one item where it's like it gives a little bit of both, it doesn't skew overly too much towards one or the other, then that in my opinion is the way to go, because you want to be able to land the crit, but you also need the crit to do some form of damage, otherwise you kind of just critically hit for nothing.
Yeah, like by default you have a 50% crit damage, so they always do a little bit more, but yeah, you definitely want to get like, you know, a good Shiver can give you 200% crit damage, so like that alone is probably the best item for giving you crit damage. And then it does the Mask of Tagura buffs that 200% as well. I think it's a 25%, so it gets you up to 250 with max rolls. It's a pretty like serious build. You can definitely like fine tune it, but it's also super easy to get like started on it. So like if I was, you know, my advice to somebody would be like, go for a crit chance build, look for crit chance rolls on your items and start stacking those, and that's probably like the easiest number one way to like start getting more and more powerful.
Yeah, that point you start to get straight results when you one shot everything that you do hit, and then that's where dexterity and strength starts to push itself up on the priority list.
Yeah, most builds you end up like right now the meta for the game, like tanking doesn't really, I've been messing around, this is a tangent I guess, but I've been messing around with the Karuzaran set a little bit and seeing how it does fare in breaches and stuff, and I want to try it for challenges, because it does tank a lot, but it's super slow. So if you don't want to waste all of your time just tanking hits, the meta is to go as fast as you can and clear stuff as fast as you can before it has the chance to hit you. So your major traits end up being the least amount of constitution that you can possibly run with and still be able to take a few hits, and then the least amount of karma that you can run and be able to cast your attacks, and then kind of the least amount of strength you can run and still one-shot everything, and then you put the rest in dexterity.
Well, the balancing act starts to come in, and it cycles back to the idea of like efficiency over anything else, because if a player wants to get stuff done, they'll drift towards what gets it done the fastest. And at the end of the day, the fastest thing is going to be like, how do I hit him as quickly as possible with as much power for every hit?
Yeah, definitely. The second build on my list is to build double attack. So double attack, I think, is more powerful than critical chance, but it's a lot harder to get, and there's not as much support for it. So putting together a double attack build is a lot tougher. So I think the advice would be to go for the crit chance build first, but while you're farming for that, hang on to things that have max rolls on double attack, because at lower numbers, double attack isn't as good as crit chance. But the higher you get, the more broken double attack becomes, because it can chain. So if you were somehow able to get 100% double attack, you would just have to attack one time and then you kill everything, because you don't stop attacking. You just always trigger the next attack. So it's kind of inherently broken the closer it gets to 100%. So if you could get even like 50% in double attack, it would be possible to chain lots of attacks. And then the thing that's good about it is double attack is just another attack. So it basically has built-in crit damage to it. So like crit chance, you get the chance and you also have to build the damage. Whereas double attack, you can just put everything into double attack and you don't have to, there isn't double attack damage, it's already built in. So it lets you use all your rolls for double attack, but it's also difficult to assemble.
I feel like depending on the setup, it has some of the potential for higher scaling than what crit would provide. Outside of the fact that it can reactivate itself and continuously trigger, it would also be capable of reactivating anything where it's like on hit gain this. So if it's like on hit gain mana, on hit gain, crit chance, on hit gain area damage, whatever on hit effect you have is able to stack on top of itself. So double attack gains more value from it, because then you can trigger it twice, 3, 4 times in a single turn.
Yeah, as we add more things into the game that trigger on hit, that definitely becomes more powerful.
If the potential rises for it to hit like 50% or more chance, which I don't even know if that's possible now. Maybe it is with extreme luck.
I have it written down here. I think it's possible realistically to get like 35 to 40%, and like everything, all max rolls could get you to 50, I think. But you'd have to roll a body that rolled 4 double attack rolls at max. So it's almost impossible. But you do have some guaranteed double attack by using a Gloop Fist offhand, and then you can also use the 2 sword main hand and head pieces to give you a 25% boost to double attack, and then the artifact Wolfspoon can give you, I can't remember if it's 10 or 12%, but it's a good chunk too.
See, I think the set is where the power from it starts to push into the higher numbers, because it increases the value of it by 25%. It's not a plus 25%, but multiplying it by that.
Yeah, it's a 25% boost.
Which at the end of the day means that if you already are at 10%, it brings it up to 12. So the higher it already is before you add on that set bonus, the even stronger it becomes. And mix it with the fact that also increases your crit chance and your area damage. Very powerful set bonus, especially for the fact that it triggers at the first tier.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can also run the offhand of the 3 sword set as well, but it doesn't give as much double attack as Gloop Fist, but it does have a more powerful attack. But then it becomes like a balancing act. In order to make the offhand of the 3 sword set good, you have to have a ton of karma or a ton of mana regenerate. which you end up not being able to do if you're focusing fully on double attack. So there's lots of stuff to play with there to make it work. But like I said, the double attack set I think is like something you start messing with when you've already farmed a ton of stuff with the crit chance build and you have, a lot of really good rolls to try out. And then you can shuffle things around and see what works best depending on what gear you've rolled. The next build I have on my list is the Destiny challenge pushing build. And this is the Vant special. He uses Destiny. And then also Pumpkinhead is super important to the build because the attack all ability on Destiny costs, I think the mana cost is 90. So you would have to have 900 karma to cast it every turn. So having a good Pumpkinhead to get that down to like 450 or even lower so that you can cast that attack all on your first turn. And then you also run Gutso as your companion so that whenever you hit your enemies multiple times with the Destiny, then it can trigger Gutso multiple times to increase your dexterity. So what happens is you go into a challenge and you hope you go first, you hope you outspeed, or you hope you can tank their attacks, and then you try to get as many hits in, on your first attack as possible and trigger the Gutso as much as you can, and then the next wave you outspeed them, and then you just snowball from there until you just steamroll the boss.
Yeah, that is a very heavy steamroll effect that you would get going on. Clearly snowballing from the beginning, because if you can survive and you can trigger that dex boost multiple times over, you're not going to give the enemies a turn. Because then after that, you continuously keep activating it, and you only get faster until you finally reach the boss fight.
Yeah, it's actually like kind of broken. It's like, I don't have any plans to nerf it, but I feel like someday Gutso's like going to break the game. When that day comes, then we'll have to have a plan. But for now, he can run amok.
It's one of those things where it stays effective if you have long fights. And challenges are exactly that. Since there's just wave after wave, and you don't exit combat compared to like a dungeon or a breach, you have to really build up that dexterity over the entirety of a battle.
The next build on the list is Waywind's Grace. So it's pretty much the same build as the Destiny build for challenges. But instead of using Destiny, you use Waywind's Grace. You get less attacks to proc Gutso, but Gutso increases your dexterity, and Waywind's Grace increases your physical damage based on a percentage of your dexterity. So it's another snowball effect where you just kind of try to get the Gutso procs, and it makes you faster and hits harder the further you go. So it's another build that can like really snowball out of control.
I feel like the bow is one of those weapons that are more unique than others, especially with the perk that it has going on, because no other perk is able to take a stat and then convert it into damage outside of just the usual using strength.
Right.
And there's a variety of different ways to increase your dexterity. It's one of those things where it's like you could almost just skip strength entirely and just use like a max dexterity build, maximize the results from the bow alone.
I have a really good bow on my new character, but I don't have Gutso yet. So I should try like a literal like 0 strength build and see how it works. Like if it's possible to hit enough and to get it spooled up. Like it would probably work. Like challenges it could work maybe. In like Dungeons and Breaches, I'm curious if it would work because you do end up like resetting each battle. So if it like takes a while to get hitting hard enough, then it might not work, but that's something I want to try.
It might depend on if it was a 1-to-1 conversion. If it's one of those things where like every 1 point, I guess it isn't with the percentage that it shows, but if every 1 point of dex was converted to 1 point of strength.
Yeah, I think it's 15% of your dexterity gets converted to physical damage.
Yeah, that might be where the fall off happens, because it's only 15%. Like if it was 50%, then you could bypass strength entirely. That 15% is a bit more limiting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I designed it that way, is because it didn't feel broken at 15, and 15 is hard to get a max roll of anyways.
Yep. And then if you do, I mean, if it was a like 50% or more of your dex is converted to the equivalent value in strength, then that would just be the way to go. Maximize your dex and just use that weapon.
Yeah, typically, like right now I'm running like around 500 strength and I have just over 1,000 dexterity. So if I went full dex and had a max roll on my bow, it would be like around 200 strength, I think, or 200 physical damage would be what would be converted from the dexterity. I'd have to do the math exactly, but it would end up being a lot lower.
Be half in your strength there.
Yeah, you'd half your strength, but with Gutso, it might not matter because you'd increase your dexterity and your physical damage along with it. So it's an interesting like theory crafted build, but I don't think anybody's actually tested it out yet.
You could even go with the new pumpkin, because the new pumpkin's a passive 30% boost to dexterity. Because the other pumpkin, where it's boosting per hit, it's 5% max per hit. So it has a ramp up time before it reaches the 30% that the other one just provides by default. So in shorter battles where you know you already outspeed the enemies because you have maximized dexterity, I feel like that one would be the way to go, because you're just boosting your default value, remove the ramp up time, and just immediately go for it.
Yeah, and then you're talking about Gordon where it buffs your crit damage. Yeah, so if you had enough crit chance.
Yep.
Yeah, if you had a bunch of crit chance.
Yeah, as a side effect, crit damage on hit.
To make that crit damage worth it, it would spool up pretty fast. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. In that case, if that was the build you were doing though, then you wouldn't necessarily need Waywind's Grace as the main hand. You could go with something else that maybe provided crit chance or something like Grave Filler.
Yeah, because then once you put on that item and you start to gain crit damage on hit, you would want to maximize your crit chance, and a main weapon that has crit chance might be essential.
Yeah, I think maybe you just invented the first build that we talked about, which is the crit chance build. Maybe put Gordon as an essential companion on that build. So just build everything for crit chance and then get your crit damage from Gordon instead of running like Glimmer or something.
As long as the crit damage potential has the ability to compete with the other crit damage sources.
Yeah, I mean, if you already have a lot of crit damage, it's going to like increase faster as well, because it increases a percentage. So if you start with 50% crit damage, you only gain 5, but if you start with 250, then you're gaining 25 each turn plus. So yeah, maybe throwing Gordon on just a regular crit chance build is the way to go.
Put on a maxed out Shiver for 200% base crit damage from that thing.
Yeah, I like that idea. There's a lot of stuff to mess with. Oh man, I just looked at our time. We're like going way over, but let's talk about the last one, and then we can wrap this thing up. So the last build that I have on the list is pretty unique, and Vant and I just kind of came up with it a couple weeks ago, and I've been running it on my new character. And it's the Dragon Twister build. So the idea of it is to use just the offhand sword from the 3 sword set, which has a move called Dragon Twister that hits everything for a ton of damage, but it has a massive mana cost. So the idea is you run that offhand, and then of course you need a pumpkin head, because that's the biggest way to like reduce your increase your mana regenerate. And then the build I'm running, I actually rolled a pair of like Rat Wranglers that had like really high mana cost reduction, and I got some mana cost reduction on a few things and some mana regenerate on a few things, and I ended up having, I can't cast Dragon Twister every turn. So like my first turn, I have to use my basic attack, but after that, I can Dragon Twister for like several turns in a row, and it works really well. But the one catch on this build is that if you have a mana spender on your main hand, then the game will prioritize the attack that you can use, so it never saves up mana for Dragon Twister if you have, a mana spender on your main hand. So the idea is we use the offhand or the main hand Apprentice Bow, which is a rare item, and it just has a basic attack. So your basic attack is super weak because it's on a rare item, but there's no mana spender on that bow, so it just saves up for your Dragon Twister, and then you can spam Dragon Twister every turn. I was just going to say, the other key piece to it at lower levels is to run Glimmer, because she will give you like a buff to your health, a buff to, and then a buff to your mana cost, or sorry, your mana regenerate. So that lets you like fill up really quickly if you don't have a good pumpkin head or enough points to put into karma yet.
So one thing I'm thinking is that if, assuming the system works in the way it should, and it probably doesn't, is if it takes the attack that is the most expensive and casts it every time when it's available, if you could set it up so that you regenerate enough mana every single turn to use it without fail, then it would endlessly spam that one attack.
Yes.
But I feel like the main issue is, like, even with good values, it's hard to get that going on the very first turn because of the sheer cost of the ability.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, the base mana cost is 25, so at level 10 it's 250 mana to cast Dragon Twister. So with your base 10% regen, you'd have to have 2500 karma, which is basically impossible. But if you have a good pumpkin head, at least like a 10%, then that cuts that in half and brings it down to, like, I guess half would be like 1200. So then you rely on some mana cost reduction or some other sources of mana regenerate to bring it down even further. Because I think my character has 30% mana regen. So I have about 700 karma. So it ends up where I can't cast it the first turn, but then I can cast it every turn after that for a while. But yeah, you're correct. In theory, if you could cast your Dragon Twister full cost first turn, then you wouldn't need the Apprentice Bow in the build.
Yeah, because then you could just put on some type of a legendary or above that provides a passive boost to enhance it even further. And that'd be like crit chance, crit damage,
yeah,
strength, something.
Damage to elites or something would even be good.
You could even put on the other sword, try to get the full set going.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you need the pumpkin head almost for sure. But yeah, you could put the other one on and get the buff to crit chance, area damage, and double attack.
Yep. Getting the mana regen, though, I'm not sure that's so possible.
Yeah, it's tough to pull off, but even if you get this build close, like I said, my character can't cast it first turn, but as long as you can survive a couple hits and then cast it your second turn, it's powerful enough. And you don't need like crit chance or anything for this build, so you can put everything else, all your other rolls can be mana cost reduction or mana regenerate, so it works out. It's, the move is powerful enough that you're not relying on crit to increase your damage. So I think that's it for the meta builds, unless you got anything else.
Looking at equipment, but what I have in my head doesn't fit because there's not the abilities that allow it to. Like, I feel like an item that gives you, I don't want to say dexterity, something more like turn advance, something that pushes you further along when you get to go again, when you get a kill. That way you could make use of something like, let's say you want to kill the first target instantly. You kill it instantly, your turn's pushed ahead, you get to go again, you kill the next target instantly, and you get to cycle through, which would make the ephemeral orb item very useful, because that increases your single target attack damage.
Right.
Greatly increasing your chance of killing the enemy, also improving the chance that you will get to advance your action again. Advancing your turn doesn't exist. It lingers as an idea.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that can be part of the ephemeral items come next March when they return.
So it's to build into like a special ephemeral set.
Yeah, we'll have to keep it in mind. I will say, whenever we first came up with the turn meter, it was the original programmer, and he did have a bunch of plans for like things. He was talking about things that would like skip turns or push the orbs back on the meter and stuff, and that was something that he was big on, but we never like followed through with it after he left. There is potential for manipulating the turn meter and stuff in ways like that, but I haven't fully figured out what those ways might be. It seems like something for later down the road, in my opinion. I
agree. Yeah, I feel like it'd be a fun little thing to add in, but it could be so hard to balance, because if you start to go again and again and near infinitely, then it's just game over.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as long as it can be balanced, as long as the enemies have the same abilities. They can have any abilities that you can have. So I will say I do have things like status effects planned, but they're not going to happen until like tier 2 is in the game, when we add like more dungeon levels and increase the level cap and stuff. So those things are down the road really far, but they are planned.
Yeah, eventually they'll find a way in, which I feel like stuff like status effects are always cool and open up a lot of different build options.
Yeah, I've got a document for tier 2 and all the stuff I want to add when that comes around, but for now we're fixing challenges and then, following our roadmap we talked about last episode. But with that, this podcast, at the beginning I was like, I don't know if we'll have enough time, if we'll fill a podcast or not, but now we're at like 50 minutes on our recording. If you listen to this whole episode, thank you very much. Thank you for your interest in our game. If you found this and you're not in our Discord, go to knobcat.com, find the link to our Discord, join us there, come talk about meta builds and your ideas. I'd love to hear them. We also have Instagram and TikTok, which are both at Dungeons Obelisk, where I've been trying to post a lot of stuff and try to reach new players and stuff. So hopefully some people start seeing our Instagram and TikTok reels and stuff and finding the game that way. And if you did show up from TikTok or Instagram, then welcome. We also ask you to leave a review if you like the game. If you listen to the podcast this long and you haven't left a review on Steam, that's the number one way that you can help people find us and help push us up in the rankings. I also have twitch.tv/DotO Official, where I stream every so often. It's about every other week. I'll stream for several hours, and then I started editing those streams down and putting them on YouTube. So you can search Dungeons of the Obelisk on YouTube and find our channel that way. If you're trying to put together a meta build of your own and break the game, you can find a lot of information to help you out on the wiki, which is at dungeonsoftheobelisk.wiki. And I think that's everything. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
See ya.